Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the TKDS Sports Network. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. Matt. I forgot to do it this week, but nonetheless, happy Wednesday, everybody, and welcome to Sports Now here on the TKDS Sports Network. And in fact, you may have noticed the different intro music. And for all of the loyal viewers and listeners out there who have listened to this show in the past, know that I have had a past of fat fingering the wrong soundtrack button. That is exactly what happened.
But this time,
once again,
this time it wasn't your finger. Usually I bring a football just to have, because if anybody knows me, they know how much I love football. Jackson decided to use the football to try to press the music button, and it did not work. So that's why there was different music being played for the last minute.
Yeah, so anyway, we have different music, but I kind of like that music. I don't know if maybe we should do a swap.
It's because you timed it perfectly. That's why. That's why it was so good going into the show, is because it sounded almost picture perfect going into the transition.
That second soundtrack, I think we're going to start implementing that into the show. At least we're trying today, and we'll see where it goes.
I don't hate it. I would say we stick with... honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to having that be intro and the other be the outro like we usually always do in the last minute. I wouldn't be opposed to that.
Anyway, nonetheless, we welcome you here to Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington. And welcome to the TKDS Sports Network. A lot to talk about today in the entire sports world. Obviously, a lot of college basketball action last night, including in your local market. For all the college basketball listeners, we will get into all the local college basketball games that we saw from last night in hour number 2 of this show. We're going to open it up. We're going to talk some Reds baseball in the offseason, the newest addition for the Cincinnati Reds, as it was announced earlier today. So we're talking about that here in just a couple of moments. We're talking about some NBA basketball, and we also have a TKDS Sports Network broadcaster and also NBA scout David Marshall joining us from 4:30 to 5. So make sure to stay tuned. I know that he brings a lot of insight with the NBA, not to mention he's worked for the NBA before as well. So looking forward to having him on the call at 4:30. But Matt, happy Wednesday, and we have a busy show today.
Yeah, busy show, and I'm going to try my best to get through it. If you can't tell by my voice, I'm not 100% right now. I don't know why, but immediately after the show yesterday, my body was like, time to start feeling terrible, and I've been feeling terrible ever since. My voice has kind of been on and off, but I'm going to try to fight through it as much as I can throughout this show. Hopefully I can, well, not hopefully. I'm going to try my very best and more than likely going to try to push all the way through the show today.
Nonetheless, Matt, a new face coming to Cincinnati. Cincinnati going out and getting another left-handed pitcher, and ultimately a left-handed pitcher that's going to be joining the Cincinnati rotation. Rotation, he was signed to a minor league contract, but a guy who also went out and threw a no-hitter for the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2021.
And yeah, talking about the Reds, I mean, we keep talking about so many different times during this offseason. We've talked about the fact that we want to see the Reds focus on the bullpen, and we want to see the Reds try to, well, not just the bullpen, but just pitching in general. It's one thing we've seen from multiple different teams so far this year when it comes to this past year when it comes to Major League Baseball. You can have a star-studded batting order, you can have a star-studded defense, but pitching needs to be a priority for a majority of teams. You take a look at some of the teams that made it to the World Series. I mean, Texas, Aroldis Chapman, Max Scherzer. That's not that those are the only players on that pitching rotation, but when you hear those two names, you think of success in the MLB. And what did Texas end up doing this past year? They won it all. You take a look at some of the teams that were fighting to make it to the World Series. Philadelphia, they had an ace 1A and 1B with that team, and obviously they just re-signed Aaron Nola, and it was quite a while ago. It was early in the offseason, but that's a huge piece to Philadelphia going back to them. So talking about the Reds, they continue to need to work on trying to – it's not that there were a ton of issues when it came to pitching last year. It was just inconsistency and injuries that really hurt this Reds team. And the fact that this offseason they're building up the – depth of the pitching rotation and the bullpen, and even some more minor league contracts being dealt to pitchers that will will cause players that have potential to potentially move up to the major leagues, work out any kinks or issues they might have in the minor leagues, and then potentially be called up if needed. So The Reds right now, I've talked about it so many different times on this show, pitching needed to be the main focal point for this Reds team this offseason. And so far, it's pretty much what they've been doing and going after, and I've been liking what the Reds have been doing this offseason.
So for the guy who's coming to Cincinnati, his name's Tyler Gilbert. Gilbert, he was with the Arizona Diamondbacks in his first 3 years of Major League Baseball. He is 29 years old. He's only played in the major leagues now for 3 years. As we mentioned, back in 2021, he threw a no-hitter for the Arizona Diamondbacks. This is a guy that has a career ERA of 4.32 and posting a 5.19 ERA in 2023. He has only pitched 91 2/3 of an innings across Major League Baseball. So ultimately, this is a guy that does not have a whole lot of experience, but he's another lefty, and joining the pitching staff, and a pitching staff that ultimately it seems as if Derek Johnson has been able to develop rather quickly, and really quality pitchers as well. Adding Gilbert, signing him to a minor league deal, I think is the best case scenario for the Reds. He is not expected to come in and make an immediate impact. He's not expected to come in and make the opening day roster. But Matt, what plagued Cincinnati last season? What plagued the Cincinnati Reds last season was pitching. So we talked about heading into the offseason, the Reds, they needed pitching. And even if it is such as signing a guy such as Tyler Gilbert, because remember, they have signed other pitchers throughout this free agency. This is their fourth pitcher that they have signed. So Gilbert, in my mind, will be expected to start in AAA to start the season. But with injuries, unfortunately, it's baseball. Injuries are going to occur. They're going to occur to your bullpen. They're going to occur to your starting rotation. Having Gilbert sitting in AAA, eating up some innings, and a guy who already has major league experience, he's already thrown a no-hitter. Outside of that, yes, he has struggled, but I'm really excited to see what he's going to do in Cincinnati under Derek Johnson.
And yeah, that's one thing that, I mean, obviously we've talked about so many different times, the pitching being the issue that the Reds need to try to address this offseason. But talking about picking up Gilbert, and obviously, like you mentioned, the fact that it's a minor league contract, I think that's the best case for Gilbert and the Reds as a whole. Because you take a look at north of 5 ERA a season ago, going into the most hitter-friendly ballpark in all of Major League Baseball. I wouldn't say it's a recipe for disaster, but it's not a recipe for good things to happen. So getting the ERA down, getting Gilbert some time to, like I said, it's not that he needs to fix things here or there, but getting comfortable with the system for the Reds and then being able to, in the minor leagues, maybe improve on some things that he might want to be trying to focus on himself, could end up propelling him to a spot on the roster for the Cincinnati Reds. And another thing we keep talking about, you talked about pitching being the most inconsistent part of the year for the Reds last year. Part of that, not all of it, but a decent chunk of that had to do with some injuries that the Reds were dealing with throughout a majority of the season. You take a pitcher like Gilbert, who isn't probably going to end up taking a starting role or be a starting pitcher for the Cincinnati Reds, but say you have Frankie Montas, instead of being a starting pitcher, goes to the bullpen, and he's like the ace out of the bullpen for the Cincinnati Reds. Hunter Green goes down. Frankie Montas is the next guy up. Gilbert can slot in and take Montas' spot in that spot in the bullpen. That's why I keep talking about the Reds need pitchers. The Reds need pitchers. The Reds needs pitchers. When it comes down to the Reds' needs, like I said, you keep adding depth to it, even if it's only signing Gilbert to a minor league contract. That's only beefing up your roster in case you might need to dip down into the minor leagues to pick up or to draw a player from the minor leagues up to the major leagues to end up relieving some potential injuries or potential tired streaks that players might go on or potential skids that players might go on. That's why the farm system for the Reds, continuing to add depth to it, is only going to make this Reds team better as time goes on, and especially if the Reds end up having an injury bug like we saw at some points during the season last year for the pitching rotation, adding depth to the bullpen could end up forcing some pitchers who are borderline starters, borderline bullpen pitchers, to, if they needed to be, moved up to a starting role, and then those players in the farm system can make their way up to the major leagues for a few weeks, however long it's needed, and they can do just as good as the relief pitcher going into the starting role and fill that role of that relief pitcher who's no longer going to be in the bullpen. They're going to be in the starting 5 rotation for the Reds. It just helps beef up the team, and like I said, adding to the farm system, especially with pitching for this Reds team, I can't hate the Reds continuing to sign more pitchers with how that's been the struggle for them for quite some time.
And Matt, obviously, the struggle for the Reds pitching staff has mainly come from injuries. We've talked about it multiple times on this show. Nick Lodolo missing the majority of the season last season. Graham Ashcraft was out for about half of the year. If you want to combine his injuries through September and even that 60-day IL stint through the middle of the season, Hunter Green missed some time. You have a lot of your starting five pitching that spent a lot of time on the IL. So when you look at what the Reds needed to do, they already have their core basis of pitching. They needed to go out and get depth. And I know that there's probably a lot of fans out there that are a little upset that they did not pursue a Sonny Gray type deal in Cincinnati or getting maybe a more seasoned veteran pitcher into Cincinnati for the Reds. But you look at who they were able to go out there and sign, and they were looking for quantity over quality, if that makes sense. And it just so happened that they got quality pitchers as well. They signed Nick Martinez, Emilio Pagan, and Frankie Montes all to 1 to 2 year deals. And these are guys that can fluctuate throughout the bullpen, or they can also fill in and eat up innings in your starting rotation role. So those three guys, although they're not some of the bigger names across Major League Baseball, such as Aaron Nola or Sonny Gray was on the market this offseason, and there's a lot more pitchers as well on the offseason. At the end of the day, I think that the Reds nailed what had needed to be done because your top of the rotation already sits Hunter Green, Nick Lodolo, Graham Ashcraft, and Andrew Abbott. The fifth spot, you have Brandon Williamson who can come in, and that starting five, you can go out and win games with any of those starting pitchers. But the question is, when one of those pitchers gets hurt, who are you going to have fill in? That's exactly where we see the Reds and these offseason additions come in. And they're coming in on a 1 to 2 year deal, so mainly prove-it deals. So at the end of the day, we're seeing a lot of cap space that's going to be saved from Cincinnati and for the Cincinnati Reds. So I like these deals. Now you can invest some more money in the offense, such as they already have, signing Candelario as well. This offseason has been perfect. I think it's made perfect sense for Cincinnati. And right now, MLB has the Reds, I believe it's at the over-under is 85.5 wins, if I'm not mistaken. It's nowhere near close to the full potential that the Reds can actually hit. And it seems like the Reds are getting the shaft right now because of the offseason that they've had. A lot of the big name, or a lot of the leagues, a lot of the big name personnel across Major League Baseball wants to give the Reds the shaft because they felt like that they should have done more in the offseason. But when in reality, you look at their situation, you look at who they've signed, and you also look at who's going to be due up for contracts in the future as well. I think the Reds nailed this 2023-24 offseason.
And yeah, the other thing that a lot of people aren't really taking too much into account is the fact that you take a look at what this Reds roster did with the amount of injuries they had to deal with and the slump that we ended up seeing them go into in the later stages of the regular season. The fact that this team got 82 wins out of an 162-game season, while at the start of the year being projected to, I think the over-under at the start of the year was like 65 wins, 65.5 wins on the year. They ended up putting up 82. So talking about this Reds team and the fact that a lot of people are kind of looking past them for not really doing much in the offseason. The one thing we keep talking about is how they need pitching, and the different scenarios we can see. Those are all what-ifs. Another what-if that can be talked about, what if the Reds' starting five rotation doesn't get hurt at all during the season? Obviously, that's a far stretch from what could possibly happen, but who's to say maybe the most injuries we see to the starting five and the five starting pitching in that rotation for the Cincinnati Reds, maybe Hunter Green tweaks his ankle and he's out for 2 to 3 weeks. And then you've got Lodolo maybe gets hurt for a week with a sprained finger or something along those lines. There's so many different, with how good this Reds team is and how good they, like you said, they go from 65.5 wins projected before the season started to, what did you say, 85.5? Right around that number. That's a 20-game jump from a season ago. Obviously, when you see them get 82 wins last year, that kind of fluctuates things a little bit on what's expected from this team in the following season. But you just take a look at this Reds team as a whole and the fact that, like I said, they dealt with so many injuries in the starting rotation last year. They went on a slump in the later stages of the season. If they don't go on that slump, this Reds team could have easily won 85 to 90 games last year alone. So talking about this Reds team and talking about how some people might be looking past them with the fact that they didn't do too much movement in the offseason, like I said, that's all basing it off of the fact that what if Hunter Green goes out for 2 months? What if Lodolo goes out for a few months? What if Ashcraft goes out for a few months? It's so many what ifs for this Reds team, but you can also, like I said, go on the what if of what if the only real injury we see to a starting pitcher for the Reds may be Hunter Green out for a month, and that's the biggest we see all season. This Reds team, if that ends up being the case, can easily be a 90-plus, maybe even close. I wouldn't say closing in on 100, but it's possible they close in on 100 wins next year. So this Reds team, the big piece to this Reds team and making it into the postseason next year is health. If the Reds stay healthy, this team can easily win 90 to 95, maybe even more games this year. And the other thing, I talk about the health, they've got to win NL Central Series, man. That's the one thing that the Reds just can't seem to ever do. If they can win series in the NL Central, then this team is going to be a lot better. And it's tough to say this team can get a lot better than what we saw a season ago with how much they improved, but this team can get a lot better than they were last year.
And Matt, not to mention, we went through this entire segment, and we haven't even once mentioned of a bullpen signing that they had with Brent Sutter coming to Cincinnati to play in Great American Ballpark for the Cincinnati Reds. Real quick before we take a break, it was also announced on Monday that the Cincinnati Reds signed 15 international signings for their organization. So the Reds, as you see, they graduated a lot of players last season coming into Major League Baseball, and we'll get to that here in just a couple of minutes. But real quick before we go into it, 15 international signings for the Cincinnati Reds, including Adolfo Sanchez, an outfielder from the Dominican Republic, who is the number 5 international prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, and then the number 42 international prospect, according to MLB Pipeline, which is Nabel Mariano, an infielder from the Dominican Republic as well. So, Matt, you see this common trend. One thing that is the most underestimated and the most underrated, I think is the right term. One thing that is the most underrated point of emphasis that the Reds made this offseason that we are not talking about is them reestablishing and rebuilding that farm. When you look at the Reds from a season ago, build that farm system and graduate quite a bit of players from that farm system. I mean, they were able to graduate, I think it was 27 players last season for Cincinnati that made their Major League Baseball debut. You look at the farm system from a year ago that lost Ellie De La Cruz, Matt McClain, Spencer Steer, Andrew Abbott, Brandon Williamson, and so many more. And then you look at what the Reds have been able to do since all those players have graduated from minor league baseball and are now a part of the core in the big league, on the big league team. They've been able to reestablish the farm system that's underneath of them and the pipeline into the Major League Baseball program. Obviously, Connor Phillips is still down there, who we saw a little bit last season in Major League Baseball, who's got a chance to make the 26-man roster in the opening day roster, but he's still down there. And then you also look at some of the other names that they've added. Ray Lauder, their first-round draft pick from a season ago. Cam Collier, who's also still down there. He was their first-round draft pick a couple of years ago. Adding these international signings to your Major League Baseball organization and in that farm system, they hold the number 2 overall pick coming up in July this season. So the Reds, they have been able to reload that farm system, which is a big point of emphasis and was a big point of emphasis for Nick Krall during the offseason because of how many players they lost in the minor leagues.
And hey, I'm not saying that it ends up being the same case, but there's one player in Cincinnati who was signed as an international free agent back in 2018. His name is Ellie De La Cruz. I'm not saying that we're going to see the same from some of the prospects we just saw the Reds sign when it comes to international signings, but Ellie De La Cruz came from a very similar kind of move for the Cincinnati Reds. So if that says anything, especially with the fact that you said there was number 5 prospect when it came down to the international rankings, it's safe to say signing those bigger name players too says all you need to know about the culture in Cincinnati as well, that a lot of people want to go there to play and a lot of people want to win with the Reds as well.
We will take a break. When we return, we'll shift our focus away from Major League Baseball and start talking about the NBA. That's all coming up next here on Sports Now.
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir. I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Back here on Sports Now, Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington on the TKDS Sports Network. Thanks for joining us once again. We're going to transition into some NBA talk. And I know that we talk about the NBA, it seems like, on this show once a week. And we've been pretty consistent at getting that once a week. But with how everything's been across the National Football League and college football and their national championship, college basketball, the craziness that's been happening in there, we haven't really been able to talk and go into much detail and much depth, or at least that Matt and I have felt like on this show thus far. And obviously that's going to change once football season's done. We're going to have quite a bit more time on our hands. So obviously there's going to be a lot of changes to this show format, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Not necessarily the show itself. It's just going to be, we're going to be in a new season. We're less than a month away now from finishing football season up completely with the Super Bowl. So we're going to be starting to transition into some more NBA talk, and I'm looking forward to that. And I'm also looking forward to having David Marshall on the call with us here starting at 4:30. David Marshall, he'll be joining us. We'll be going over the overview of the NBA. He is a broadcaster for the TKDS Sports Network. Not to mention, he's also an NBA scout. He used to work for the Los Angeles Lakers, so he's got a lot of insight with the NBA, so happy to bring him on. And we're also going to start trying to get him on a little bit more consistently on this show to talk NBA basketball as well.
And yeah, talking about the change, obviously, there's going to be a little bit of downtime between the end of football season, and Jackson, you and I have talked about it so many different times with the fact that we have, almost 35 plus years of baseball experience combined. We feel like, I wouldn't say it's 35. If it's not 35, it's getting close to 35, but you're 22 now. I'm almost 22. I've got a few more weeks until I hit that. Well, not a few more weeks. I have 12 more days before I hit that mark, but we're going to have a little bit of a downtime between the end of the football season and the start of spring training and the start of the MLB season. So it's pretty much going to be basketball, and more basketball to talk about in that time frame. So there will be a little bit of a downtime, and the point I was getting with baseball is Jackson and I could probably fill the whole 2 hours during the MLB season just talking about Cincinnati Reds baseball throughout an entire 2-hour show. But yeah, the NBA, you talk about, there's not going to be a change in format. It's still going to be 2 hours every single day except for Friday and Sunday. And then obviously Saturday we've got the high school show that we do. But yeah, we're going to have to start talking about we've already talked quite a bit about college basketball, but we definitely got to get some NBA talking going on.
Well, let's move into the NBA once again. David Marshall will be joining us here in just about 5 minutes or so. And let's move on in the NBA. And the biggest news that's going across the National Basketball Association right now is tragic news. It is saddening news. Obviously, the Warriors-Jazz game was postponed tonight, and it was because Warriors assistant coach Dejan Milojevic is tragically passed away at 46 due to a heart attack.
Yeah, I didn't catch the news that he had passed away, but I did see the game had been postponed due to a medical emergency. I think it was at a restaurant that the team was having a dinner at last night. I don't know if it was last night, but yeah, it makes sense that the game was postponed, and we've talked about the Warriors so many different times on this show, talking about the fact that currently right now they're the number 12 team in the West. They need to try to get something going to get themselves back into the playoff conversation, and obviously not anything you want to hear for any team. You can love the team, you can hate the team, it doesn't matter. If something tragic like that happens, you have to send your thoughts and prayers to the players, to that team, to that organization. And for the Warriors, like I said, again, the game was supposed to be tonight against the Jazz. Makes total sense that game was postponed. Don't know when the game should be played, but it's safe to say there should be as much time given to the Warriors team as needed to help them get past this.
And it's not like it's just... Coach Milojevic was a stand-up guy in the locker room. He was with them every single day, and he was truly a part of the family, and he was a part of what made Golden State Golden State. He was Steve Kerr's right-hand man. So when you lose somebody like that in your organization, and when it's tough. It's certainly tough when you lose somebody like that in the organization. And, thoughts and prayers go out to all the Golden State Warriors members, players, fans, everybody in that organization, especially in 46, such a young age, very unexpected. And it was the right move by the NBA to postpone this game tonight. And we don't know. There may be more games in the future that are postponed. And now, obviously, when the news was broken that there was a postpone in the game, it was... there weren't really any clear ideas on why that game was postponed, but then it was just reported about an hour ago that Coach Milojevic has tragically passed away after some life-saving efforts. So obviously some sad news here, and we don't want to sit on the sad news for the entire length of the show, but obviously all thoughts and prayers go out to the Golden State Warriors and their fan base, their community, and most importantly, Coach Milojevic's family and friends as well.
And yeah, like I said, for the Warriors, it's not to say that this is going to fuel the team towards a good run as the season goes on, but it's safe to say with how well loved he was throughout the organization, I think this is obviously you don't want this to be the reason your team turns things around, but it's safe to say the Warriors have a little bit more to play for now throughout the remainder of this season. And that's not me trying to make light of the issue. It's a tragic event. Like I said, I didn't even see that he had passed away until you mentioned it, Jackson, because the article I had read earlier in the day, because I'd seen an article about the game being postponed due to a medical emergency. So it's horrible news, not something that, like I said, you can love the Warriors, you can hate the Warriors. It doesn't matter. They need your thoughts and prayers right now. That's all that we can do as show hosts towards the Golden State Warriors right now. Like I said, our thoughts and prayers are with the Golden State Warriors, the family, everybody involved, and everybody that is involved with the Golden State Warriors. At least myself. I know you probably reciprocate it too, Jackson, but thoughts and prayers go out to the Golden State Warriors right now.
Matt, we're going to take a small break, and when we come back, we are going to welcome David Marshall to the call. But before we go to the break, we don't want to end on a somber tone. We thoughts and prayers go out, but let's try to pick it back up and let's translate it. And here's some good news: the Detroit Pistons have won 2 out of their last 10 games. They have doubled their win total from what they've had for the first 2 months of the season in the last 2 weeks. So congratulations, Detroit Pistons. We'll be back with David Marshall on the phone.
It's easy to take the air in your home for granted, but it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted, but it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
We welcome you back here to Sports Now. Jackson Lightcap Matthew Pennington here on the TKDS Sports Network. And we are also joined with David Marshall, broadcaster for the TKDS Sports Network and also NBA scout as well. David, can you hear us loud and clear?
I can hear you loud and clear, my man.
David, happy Wednesday. We are halfway through the week, and thank you again for taking...
Hold on, I got feedback. Oh, sorry.
David, once again, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us here on Sports Now. And we'd like to make this maybe a weekly occurrence with you as we talk about NBA basketball. Obviously, has been a scout for the NBA for many years. He's a broadcaster now for TKDS Sports Network. And David, before we start talking about the overview and what you've seen so far this season across the National Basketball Association, kind of tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with the NBA and TKDS.
Well, it was always a passion of mine to... Hang on, Jax. I'm getting feedback. I'm sorry. How do I get rid of the feedback?
That's above my pay grade.
Hold on. Let me try this. How's that?
It sounds fine on our end.
Yeah, I got it. I'm sorry, guys. I got involved in NBAs. I was in the college area. A friend of mine, he worked for the Sacramento Monarchs, which is a WNBA team. They actually won a WNBA championship in like 2007. He needed me to scout some regional games for him. And when I got out of the college, he was the video coordinator for the Kings. So it just paralleled. He gave me some games regionally to do. and then he recommended me some people. And I do regional. I'm an independent scout for him, so I do regional work for certain organizations. So most of my games are based out of Indianapolis, Detroit, in Cleveland. I did some games in Chicago, Atlanta, those areas. Sometimes you got to go and do the work. So that's as far as the NBA. And then I got involved with Kevin. A friend of mine, Steve Wolf, recommended I do some basketball announcing. And I was doing the state tournament. And I ran into Kevin Fowler, the Ohio State tournament. And I ran into Kevin. I had ran into him prior for a prep school event. So we just kind of talked some more and say, hey, next year, let's work together and do some games. And so here we are.
Well, David, super happy that you've been able to come on board with TKDS Sports Network. And I know Matt and I have both really enjoyed working with you in the past. And obviously, with everything that you've done for the NBA and the scouting, congratulations on everything. And once again, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us here today. And David, there's been a lot that's been going around in the NBA this season as we're approaching that midway mark. And this NBA season has looked a little bit different than years past because this season featured the first ever in-season tournament that the NBA put on earlier back in November and into December.
Yeah, that was actually it was interesting because you could tell guys were competing to win that. I think what the main thing they wanted to be one of the first people to win it, and I think that was something important for LeBron more than anybody that he wanted to win it. I think now I do believe this. I do believe they got gas, like they expended a lot of energy and they couldn't recoup. And they started out, even them in Indianapolis started out slow after the end season. But now Indianapolis seemed to turn the corner. It just doesn't seem the Lakers have. And there could be various reasons, but I look at that too, because LeBron's older. That's a lot of energy to expend that early in the season. And for him to get it back, it's going to be hard.
And David, that's something that Matt and I have also kind of alluded to, especially last week on this show, was the in-season tournament. And obviously a huge success for the NBA, a lot more viewership, a lot better ratings. They made a lot of money by doing that as well. So the players enjoyed it. So ultimately a win-win-win-win on everything. But you look at some of these teams that went on a deeper run into the in-season tournament, like the Los Angeles Lakers, who ended up winning it over the Pacers 123-109 way back on December 9th. And you look at what they've done since, and they've had a losing record since that in-season tournament. They've ultimately struggled to turn things around 20-21 or 20-21 on the season thus far for the Los Angeles Lakers. And Matt and I have talked about this on this show, and one thing that we'd like to see the tournament continue, but one thing that we've seen so far with featuring that tournament in the in-season is there's not as much difference between the in-season tournament and that award that'll be presented and the NBA Finals. So do you see maybe players that have won the in-season tournament maybe now thinking that they have accomplished their goals on the season, although it has nothing to do with the NBA playoffs? What's your thoughts on what you've seen with some of the drop-offs out of some teams that made it farther than other teams in the NBA in-season tournament?
Well, I do think a younger team benefits from it. For example, the New Orleans Pelicans were completely embarrassed by the Lakers. But if you look now, they're probably one of the better teams. I mean, they're playing fabulous basketball. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but a big trade just happened. But everybody knew it was going to happen. Pascal Siakam got traded to the Pacers. So that's gonna change their lineup. So what happens around this time is teams are starting to recognize, hey, we need to load up. I think we got a team that's gonna make a run. Now, the Pacers, Halliburton went out with a hamstring pull. He's gonna be okay. But if he was out for an extended amount of games, I don't think they would have made that trade because it's the unknown. Now they know they're gonna get him back. He's gonna be fully healthy. They feel like they got it, and I do think the Pacers have a chance to advance. I really do. Their style of play, I don't know if it carries over to playoff basketball, because playoff basketball is going to be more half court. Possessions are smaller. Yeah, it's different. But the Pacers have excelled. The Pelicans have excelled. Those are the two teams I felt benefited.
And David, you talk about the Indiana Pacers, and one thing that really benefits them is that it seems as if their window is just opening, and they've been one of the surprise teams across the NBA so far this season that at least Matt and I have paid attention to, and especially because they're the closest team to where our studios are located here in Southwest Ohio. But you look at the Indiana Pacers, and you see obviously Tyrese Halliburton and what Halliburton's been able to do. He's a tremendous player. He could shoot. He is an incredible player at getting assists as well. And then you look at who they've built around him, such as Miles Turner, who's been there for quite some time, Obi Toppin, former UD Flyer, Bruce Brown coming back and coming over, Benedict Mathurin, who's been with the Pacers now in his second season, who was their first-round draft pick a couple of years ago. Now you're adding to the mix Pascal Siakam, and it's easy to believe that the Indiana Pacers, they are wanting to buy into this season, and they're wanting to buy in, and they believe that they have the core to do so. But on the flip side, they're also in a really good situation because this is still a very, very young core, especially with Tyrese Halliburton leading the way.
Right, exactly. And I think that's why they felt comfortable making that move. So, sometimes you got to make a move. Like, Pacers have struggled a bit first couple of years, but now I feel like they got the core they want, and now they're ready to move forward and make some plays. And they didn't really hurt their team. They sent a couple guys, but they didn't lose Toppin. They gave them 3 first-round picks. They're not consecutive first-round picks. You can do 2. You can actually get – the NBA doesn't allow you to give consecutive picks anymore. And the reason why is the Cleveland Cavaliers owners years ago, before Mr. Gunn, he would trade all his first-round picks because he didn't want to pay them. So they put in a rule like, hey, every other year you got to have a pick. So you can't just trade away consecutive picks. So when you watch the draft, you'll see that. But now the Pacers have definitely, Kevin Pritchard has done a great job of putting that team together. They stayed the course.
And especially a Pacers team that has struggled over the last couple of years. It's nice to see Indiana once again have a winning basketball team, and a team that also has struggled, it seems as if, in the playoffs over the last decade when they've been able to make it to the playoffs. And when you look at the Pacers, this is a team that as long as they can keep winning, this is a team that can put themselves in position to possibly make a push. Obviously, you said you don't necessarily know if they are built for playoff basketball, and that also comes to believe that the lack of experience that this team has if they were to make the playoffs, and also the youth that's for the Indiana Pacers, a chance to grow and a chance to blossom for Indiana. And as you mentioned, the draft deal, so they're going to be able to continue to add players even with giving those first-round draft picks over to Toronto as well. So when you look again at what Indiana has done, it's been a great season, and ultimately it's been an unexpected season. And David, you also have said that you've been high on the New Orleans Pelicans, especially with what they've been able to do after that in-season loss game, the in-season tournament loss to the Los Angeles Lakers way back in November.
Yes, I agree. And I know those guys was trying to make some moves to get Pascal Siakam was a big thing to get. But Brandon Ingram's the same guy, and Brandon Ingram's better. So they don't really need that type of player. They probably need another 2 with CJ McCollum, and then maybe another backup big that's out there that they could get. I just don't know if they can get anybody from the West. They got to look at the East. They got to purge like the Wizards roster. cellar dweller. Chicago's the one that's kind of messing things up because they're teetering on, do we keep the team together or do we blow it up? So that they're wavering on what they want to do. Because that's the team you would think everybody would purge. Toronto's been purged. They've already made a commitment. We're gonna focus on Scotty Barnes and we're gonna build around him. You already see what they're doing. Charlotte, you may pluck someone from Charlotte. Maybe Gordon Hayward could be a good backup to McCollum, but that contract hit is a big hit. So that's going to be the key. Who's willing to say, "Hey, we're done. We're going to purge our team. We're open for trades."
And that's certainly where we are at the part of the NBA season. We're at the midway mark, and we're going to see some buyers. We're going to see some sellers. And All-Star Weekend also not too far away as well, just about a month away. David, we invite you to stay with us. We have to take a real quick break. We'll be back in a few moments here on Sports Now.
Sure thing.
Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi. How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe, and I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi. How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe, and I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi. How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe, and I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Daddy. Hi, Daddy.
Hi. How you doing?
So the furnace is on its last leg, babe.
And I just don't know what to do.
I wish I could be there to help.
Being away is always difficult, but it doesn't mean you can't make decisions together. You can count on us to keep your family comfortable.
Hey, buddy, how's it going?
When are you coming home?
It's gonna be soon. Faster than you know it, I'll be home.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
At 4:51 p.m. Eastern Time, we're back here on Sports Now, and we are also joined once again with David Marshall, NBA scout and a broadcaster for the TKDS Sports Network. We were just talking over the break, and David is going to start becoming a part of the show. Obviously, we have Caleb Spinner coming on every Tuesday and Thursday to talk Ohio State athletics. Obviously, their football, their basketball team in full swing of effects, their football season. I mentioned them because right now they've been the most busy team, it seems like, in all of college football in the transfer portal. So just like he calls in every Tuesday and Thursdays, we're going to start trying to find time for David to start calling in as well and giving some insight on the NBA, because we feel here at Sports Now that Matt and I are pretty knowledgeable across the NBA, but the amount of knowledge that David holds with the NBA is more than Matt and I combined. So having him on the show is definitely a blessing. And David, obviously, we have you for about 8 more minutes or so on this show. But let's transfer over from the overview of the NBA and let's start talking about NBA MVP. We're at the midway mark of the season. This is ultimately where the media is going to start driving NBA MVP odds as well. So looking forward to that. So we're going to start kind of transitioning to who's played the best first half of the season. And I'm right now looking at FoxSports.com and Nikola Jokic from the Nuggets, plus 250 odds. Joel Embiid right behind him with plus 275. And there's a lot of great talents on this list. And David, for you, who's your favorite? And also, if the season were to end today, who's a underdog that you also could see rising to the occasion here in the second half of the season?
I tell you what, man. I like Tatum. He's playing on he's the best player on the best team. He's playing the best. He just needs to erupt to separate everything. But right now, Jokic is the leader again. You can't. And Jokic his numbers alone validates him being MVP. I mean, and Embiid. I think Embiid's numbers should be Embiid, or actually Embiid's case this year is better than last year. You know, but the dark horse is in mine, and I think Jason Tatum, but the dark horse is going to be SGA, and he's only third in the voting. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. You get a chance to watch him; he's phenomenal.
And you. Sorry, David, didn't mean to cut you off there. And you look at SGA from the Thunder and what the Thunder's been able to do. They're sitting right now currently in the season 27-13, and you take him out of the picture. Most valuable player means you need this player to be as good as you are. And you take SGA out of the equation for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Oklahoma City, at the end of the day, it seems like they're maybe a 500 team, but being 27-13, especially over the last couple of years that they've had, and also some of the adversity that they've had to go through the locker room as well. So with SGA being in that conversation and ultimately leading the Thunder to that 27-13 record, him in third in voting, but only plus 300 odds. So at the end of the day, this is also a guy who, David, I completely agree with you, I think could be a dark horse in rising to the top of the occasion for winning NBA MVP. Obviously, we're only halfway through the season. We still have a completely new second half as well.
Yeah, I agree. He's a fine talent. Does a really good job. Plays hard. I mean, I'll give you an example. We didn't even talk about this young man. He's a phenomenal talent. He plays both ends of the court. Anthony Edwards. So there's a lot of great candidates this year. It's just not a two-man race. I guarantee you that. Here's where it's going to come down to.
And yeah,
If it's a close playoff race at the end, whomever seems like they're carrying their team is going to be the winner. And that's going to be the Edwards, Embiid, and whoever does it. I think everyone is nominated. Doncic, all of them. They're going to be the ones. Now, Doncic plays prime time tonight against the Lakers in LA. And if he puts on the performance and they win, he's going to shoot up. So, and I think that's another name. I mean, Doncic, he's probably the best player in the league.
And David, you look at also not only NBA MVP odds, but you also look at the season that they've been able to have. And it seems like now in the NBA, we look at the odds and we look at the top 10 favorites across the NBA. Obviously, you have Jokic 1, Embiid number 2, SGA number 3, Doncic number 4, Giannis 5, Tatum 6, Edwards 7, De'Aaron Fox 8, Kevin Durant 9, and Tyrese Halliburton 10. Those are your top 10 odds right now for winning the NBA MVP. And obviously, we're only halfway through the season. We still have a completely second half of the season remaining and upcoming as well. But you look at the talent that's surrounding, and you look at who's also left on the outside of the top 10. Obviously, no Steph Curry, no Kawhi Leonard, no Paul George, no LeBron James. There's so many big names right now, it seems like, across the NBA. And that really raises the debate and really raises the argument. Is this the most talent that we have ever seen across the NBA? Or has there been years past, such as the 90s era or the 80s era, the 70s era, that has featured more talent than today's day and age of basketball?
You know, to be fair, I think what happens is in the 80s, the 90s, and let's just be honest, in the 2000s, there's 4 or 5 names that could probably win MVP every year. I'll go to the 80s. Magic, Larry Bird, Kareem. Go to the 90s. Michael Jordan. He could have won it every year when he played. We come to the 2000s, Kobe, and then LeBron. And let's not forget Shaq. So those 3 could have won it every year when they're putting up good numbers. And even up until now, until maybe two years ago, LeBron. So this is interesting. LeBron's not going to be MVP. He's not even in top voting. And I think that's an accurate assessment. If anybody's going to be MVP on that team, it would have been Anthony Davis. But it just shows you how great LeBron is, because these other guys are really terrific ball players. So you got to give credit to that. So yes, I think it's probably the most even race that I've seen. I thought last year it was Embiid and Jokic, hands down. This one's wide open.
And yeah, that's one thing you talked about in the past, multiple different players that you kind of have your maybe top 3 in mind that should win it. That's one thing that I want to see for this year. I want to see Doncic or SGA. I want to see one of those 2 win it, because we talk about those consistent names. Past 5 years, it's been Giannis, Jokic, or Embiid. Those are the last 3 to win it. You have Giannis winning it in 19 and 20. You have Jokic winning it 21, 22. And then you have Embiid winning it last year. So the fact that we've got, obviously, Embiid and Jokic are the leaders right now when it comes to the odds as we speak. But SGA from Oklahoma City, you see what the Thunder have been able to do this year, and then take a flip back a page. 2 years ago, this team wasn't even in conversations for the playoffs at all. And then you have Doncic pretty much doing Luka Doncic things and not being the favorite for the MVP, but always being in the conversation for it. Talking about a few different names that you usually see. I'd love to see Doncic or SGA kind of, I wouldn't say break through the barrier to win the MVP, but past few years, it feels like it's been Jokic or Embiid that have really been the front runners. So the fact that we've got SGA, and you mentioned Tatum, I've liked watching Tatum play basketball for Boston for quite some time now, but odd-wise, he's kind of on the outside looking in, but a few good games can put him on the inside of the conversation. And then, obviously, like I said, Luka, sometimes it feels like he doesn't give as much credit. He doesn't get as much credit as what he does on the floor because, like you mentioned, David, he is one of, if not the best players in the NBA right now, and he's got 3 times of as harder of a chance to get it. If the odds were to stop now, it'd be 3 times harder for him to get it based on the odds than Jokic. So I would like to see SGA or maybe Doncic be that player to – it's not that they need to break the ice and take it away from Jokic or Embiid, but talking about the consistent players you see, I like seeing SGA in there. I like seeing Doncic in there. Obviously, Edwards and Tatum, they've had phenomenal years, and it may take a few games to get them into front-runner status, but I like seeing how narrow it is for the top 5. And then, like I said, you've got a few players outside of the top 5 right now that a few breakout games, they're inside the top 5 themselves. So I do like that. I don't like that it's Jokic and Embiid still as 1 and 2 right now, but I do like that it's pretty tight for the top 5 spots. And then, like I said, you can make an argument for Tatum if he has a big game or 2. You can make the same argument for Edwards. He has a big game or 2. It's not a few-person race or a few-player race. We can have it up to 7 in a few games with how close it is right now.
And with that all, I think that we lost.
David.
Yes, we lost David Marshall. There he is. David, are you with us?
What happened?
I don't know what. I think that technology wanted to do some technology things there, but we lost you for a second. You're back now.
I'm back.
Well, David, thank you for calling back in, but it is time for a break. And once again, thank you for, I know that we just got you back, but David, thank you so much once again for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us here on Sports Now. We'd like to make this a weekly occurrence, and we hope to talk to you here in the future as soon as next week.
For sure. Great job, guys. Keep up the great work. Thanks for having me.
Once again, that is David Marshall, NBA scout and broadcaster for the TKDS Sports Network. Time for a break. We'll be back here on Sports Now, hour number 2, coming up next.
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down. Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Help with anything, Gigi?
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down.
Go. It's okay.
Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington here on Sports Now. Just got off the phone with David Marshall. Great guy. And we love working with him. We've worked with him for quite some time here for the TKDS Sports Network. I shared a mic with him at King of the Bluegrass tournament a couple weeks ago in Louisville, Kentucky for that tournament. So great guy. I really love having him on, and we're going to try to get him on as much as possible as well to continue to talk NBA. And what better way to talk NBA basketball with an NBA scout who also works for our network. So looking forward to that. But Matt, let's now move in to college basketball. And first off on our docket, we have a lot of local games to get into. But you look at Ohio State, ended up losing to Michigan on Monday. And now we're starting to see the Ohio State Buckeyes. I don't necessarily want to say teeter-tottering, but they're 12-5 now. And the Ohio State Buckeyes they are now on a 3-game losing streak after losing to Indiana, then Wisconsin, then Michigan. It's almost the same exact story that we're seeing from last season's Ohio State team, where they played great out of conference, got everybody's hopes up, and now they're starting to hit the brick wall in the powerhouse that we call the Big Ten.
And yeah, it's not going to get any easier for Ohio State as this week and as I would say the rest of the month goes on. Yeah, because all of these games that I'm about to bring up are in January. You take a look at the 3-game skid. Indiana, very good team. Wisconsin, you're top 11 in college basketball. You're a pretty good team if you're ranked inside the top, just outside the top 10, but inside the top 15. The loss to Michigan, that was the biggest uh-oh moment for Ohio State, I would say, in this 3-game skid. But you got a team coming up next to play on the schedule. It's 3 days from now. It's on the 20th when they play Penn State. But it's the team that gave you your first conference loss of the season. So this game for Ohio State, it's a home game. It's not that they have to win it, but you almost feel like they have to win it because after that game against Penn State, the rest of January goes as follows. On the road against Nebraska, on the road against Northwestern, at home against number 14 Illinois. So Ohio State, I was talking about the loss to Wisconsin last week, how their path to try to turn things around isn't as difficult as some other teams in the local area that we talk about, but losing that game to Michigan only makes that turnaround more difficult because if there's any team of the 4 that you had before your next game against a ranked opponent being Illinois, if there was any 4 of those games you should have won, it was the game against Michigan. Penn State, you've already lost to them. It was a close game earlier on in the season, but you did lose to them for your first conference loss of the season. And then, like I said, you're on the road against Nebraska, on the road against Northwestern. The only teams so far in the Big Ten to beat Purdue. So you take a look at what Ohio State needs to do as this season goes on. Like I said, I'm not saying that they have to win their upcoming game against Penn State at home, but you almost get the feeling that they kind of have to win this game against Penn State because if not, it's only going to make, and I keep saying it multiple times, but it doesn't mean it's not true every time I say it, that's only going to make the road for Ohio State to turn the season around and to get a better conference record and potentially be a team to make it into March Madness. You lose to Penn State at home, then you've got 2 road games against 2 very tough Big Ten teams, and then you're at it, and then you've got a game against Illinois. Your schedule's only going to get tougher as the rest of this month goes on. Might as well start off the rest of this month on a good note and get a win against Penn State.
And Matt, you talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes and that men's basketball program having a tough schedule, and you talk about the upcoming Big Ten. This is a team that over the last couple of years have played great out of conference, and once they get into conference, they struggle. They hit a brick wall, and that's really what collapses their season. Ohio State, this upcoming game against Penn State on the road on Saturday is a must-win game. The reason I say that is because the next couple of games Ohio State plays are very winnable games. You have Penn State, Nebraska. Not saying that those are bad teams by any means, because when you look at the Big Ten and their conference standings, the worst team is Michigan, and it seems like every other team, I believe, is up into double digits. So when you have Penn State, Nebraska, those should be games that Ohio State should ultimately come out and end up winning. Those are Penn State. This one's going to be at home. Nebraska, this one is going to be on the road. But then you look at their upcoming schedule after that. You have Northwestern, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Maryland, Wisconsin, and then Purdue. All of those games are tough matchups, especially for Ohio State. And Ohio State, if they can split and go 500 in that little segment of their schedule, at the end of the day, then they can possibly make a run, and that could install a lot of confidence for the Buckeyes. But what are the Buckeyes lacking right now? Confidence. 3-game losing streak. You cannot go into that section of your schedule on a 5-game losing streak. These next 2 games against Penn State and Nebraska must-win games, especially you being 2-4 in the conference. These are 2 games that can get you back to 500 before this gauntlet of a schedule you have coming up. Not saying Ohio State cannot win these games, because they most certainly can win these games, but at the end of the day, these next 2 games for the Ohio State Buckeyes must win. Now, Matt, let's shift focus and let's talk a little bit about Wright State. Wright State, they lost last Friday night at Youngstown State, a test for the Wright State Raiders. Wright State, their lowest game offensively of the entire season, held to just 71 points. We say just 71 points like it's a bad thing. Once again, it's the defense of the Wright State Raiders that lets them down, allowing 81 points. So again, we're starting to see this common theme continue on for the Raiders. Raiders, tremendous offensive team. They have not been able to figure out defensively. Not to mention, they were up, I believe, 15 points in that game as well, and let Youngstown State come all the way back. That is a devastating and a crushing loss for the Wright State Raiders. And again, we talk about how important it is to play well in Horizon League, because frankly, the only way that Wright State's going to make March Madness in the NCAA tournament this season is by winning in the Horizon League. So big game upcoming. They're back at home against Green Bay on Thursday. And I'd even say the same for Wright State. I think that this is a must-win game for the Wright State Raiders.
And yeah, the one thing and the bigger problem that we saw take place in that game for Wright State was it was a back-and-forth game for a majority of it against Youngstown State. But you take a look as the game goes on, 63-55 was the score with 8:42 left to go in the game. Then you fast forward further down the line, 3:44 left to go in the game. So about a 5-minute span of time, Youngstown State is at 73 points. Wright State is at 63 points. That is an 18-point swing towards Youngstown State. The defense for Wright State in that moment obviously did not show up for that 5-minute time period. And to me, the bigger shock was the fact that the offense didn't show up in that 5-minute time frame. So for Wright State, talking about the offense being prolific so far this season, the defense being what has really cost this Raiders team, that right there says it all. A 5-minute period of time where Youngstown State, down 8 points, ends up going up 10 after that 5-minute stretch of time. The offense for Wright State not doing anything, which is unlike Wright State. But then the defense, allowing 18 points while your offense can't get a basket. That's one thing for Wright State. We talk about the defense, how it has struggled all season long. That's going to be another issue for this Raiders team. If they go on dry spells like we just saw in that game against Youngstown State, and they have a 5-minute time frame where they just cannot hit a shot, the defense, if you're not hitting shots on offense with this Wright State Raiders defense, you're going to get zero, and I mean zero help down the stretch of the whatever run your opponent's going on. If it's a 5-point run, if it's a 10-point run, if it's an 18-point run like we saw Youngstown State go on, if Wright State's offense does not play consistently throughout the entirety of a game and they go on a dry spell, that is disaster for Wright State. It proved itself against Youngstown State and the Penguins. 18-point swing with 8:40 to go in the game. 3:40 to go, they go in that 5-minute time frame, they go from up 8 to down 10. That cannot happen. Not for Wright State, not for a team that, like you mentioned, right now when it comes down to the Horizon League and the standings, when it comes down to the Horizon League and the chances of these teams making it into March Madness, for Wright State, if they want a chance to make it into the tournament, this cannot happen anymore throughout the season. It would be, and I say okay to happen, it would be okay to happen if it's your opponent going on an 8-point run and you're up 25 points. Then it might be okay for that to happen. But still, you do not want to see that happen for Wright State throughout the remainder of the season. And if it does, it's probably going to be make or break for this Wright State Raiders team as the season, when it comes down to the season, because when it comes to the Horizon League tournament, better seeding is phenomenal with the type of teams that we see in this tournament. Obviously, you're going to play some tough teams when it comes down to the end of the tournament, but getting that higher seed it's only going to be a boost for this Wright State Raiders team. In that defense, they still got to try to find a way to get that defense going, because if they can't, Wright State's going to be struggling throughout the remainder of the year.
It is time for a break. When we return, the Xavier Musketeers, it seems as if they have found their stride, winning their last 2 games. That and more coming up next here on Sports Now. When we return, we're in hour number 2 of this 2-hour show.
At McAfee, it's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. It's easy to take the air in your home for granted. But it's not just about being hot or cold. It's about having clean air. For some of us, this is critical. At McAfee, we'll provide you with long-term solutions to improve the air you breathe.
Do you need your inhaler, bud?
Oh, I'm good, thanks.
Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
The Xavier Musketeers have won their last 2 games. A heartbreaking defeat against UConn and Villanova back a couple of weeks ago. They lost to Villanova 66-65. They lost to UConn 80-75. Then they bounced back. They beat Providence on the road 85-65, and then they beat Butler 85-71 at home last night. They now play Georgetown at home at the Cintas Center this upcoming Friday. And Matt, as we've talked about, the Xavier Musketeers are an incredibly great team. Do not let their 9-8 record confuse you. Do not let the Xavier Musketeers 9-8 record confuse you, because this is a team that has been so close. It has been a season of just ultimately falling just short of their goal. You look at some of their games that they've played back early in the season. Against Washington comes to mind. Purdue comes to mind. Do not let the Xavier Musketeers 9-8 record fool you, because this is a much better team than their record. And it seems like the Xavier Musketeers are starting to hit their stride in the middle of the season, exactly when you want to hit their stride. And Matt, you look at their upcoming schedule as well. Obviously, they have Georgetown on Friday night. They have Creighton, and then they have UConn again on January 28th. And it seems to me that this is a buildup. This is the rising action for the climax of that game against UConn. And the UConn Huskies, again, now number 1 in the entire nation. So Xavier, they still have a lot to play for. This is a young team that has faced a lot of adversity through the season. The story of their season has been them coming so far, but finishing just short. But this is a team that is starting to find their stride in the middle months of the season, and ultimately what you want to see from the Xavier Musketeers.
And yeah, you take a look at Xavier's record overall in this season. Let's take a look at all the losses they've got on the year. Lost to UConn by 5. Lost to Villanova, a team that is getting votes for top 25, by 1 on the road. The big blemish on the schedule, well, there's a few blemishes on the schedule, but one of the bigger ones is St. John's, also another team that is currently getting a ton of votes to being a top 25 team. Lost to them on the road by 15. The 2 bigger blemishes on the record for Xavier this year, 7-point loss to Delaware, 2-point loss to Oakland. Outside of that, 3-point loss to Washington, 12-point loss to Purdue, and then a 6-point loss to Houston. It's safe to say this Xavier team as a whole, you also have to add in wins against Cincinnati, win against Seton Hall, obviously, like you mentioned, win against Providence, who has been in the top 25 at points this year, and then a win against Butler. It's safe to say the Xavier team, you talk about building up to that game against UConn and that rematch against UConn, it's safe to say the Xavier team, and you talk about how they are a lot better than their record shows. I think if you just take a look at the schedule for Xavier, you might just think, man, but they lost to Oakland and they lost to Delaware. You also have to take a look at how good they've been playing some pretty good teams so far this year. I mentioned that Villanova game, lost by 1. The game against Houston, lost by 6. Purdue, obviously it wasn't as close of a game, but you're playing on the road against Purdue. You lose that game by 12, and Purdue has been one of the best teams all season long. Then you lose by 5 to UConn in a close game all the way down to the wire. It's safe to say this Xavier team, especially if they can continue to win like we've seen the past 2 games, if they take down Georgetown, take down Creighton, and then eventually, potentially, it's possible, they take down UConn, it's safe to say this Musketeers team, if they take down UConn, it's guaranteed to happen. But if they take down Creighton, this Xavier Musketeers team is going to start getting the respect they deserve, and they're going to start being in the conversation, in the talking of, maybe this team should start creeping up towards being mentioned in the top 25. I think with the amount of losses they have on the year, I don't think it's too easy for Xavier to get into the top 25. But if we see them run the table throughout the remainder of the year, take down Creighton twice, take down Marquette twice, and then take down UConn in that game, and then take down St. John's, take down Villanova, take down Seton Hall again. Obviously, I'm talking about the Xavier team pretty much sweeping the remainder of the season. But if they do that, which it would be tough for Xavier to do, but they've proven that they can fight with anybody in the Big East so far this year, I keep talking about Cincinnati. They should be ranked, how close they've been at times. Ohio State, before the skid that they went on, that 3-game losing streak, they should be in the conversation for a top 25 team. UD, they are in the top 25. They're ranked 21 right now. This Xavier Musketeers team, it's going to take a lot more for them to be in the conversations of being ranked. But when you just take a look at the losses that they have and how close they've played against some of the top teams in college basketball, you can't keep them out of your mind as a potential team that down the stretch, if they keep winning games, this Musketeers team could end up being, I would say at best, they might be able to get to 20 at best because of the losses to Oakland and to Delaware earlier on in the year and the loss to St. John, 1-point loss to Villanova. Those kinds of losses are going to hang on Xavier's shoulders throughout the remainder of the season. But it's totally possible. Like I said, they would have to, I would say, run the gauntlet of the Big East throughout the remainder of the season to have this happen. But don't be surprised if Xavier might start getting into people's minds of maybe this team could start creeping into the conversation to be on a top 25 team. It's going to be a really tall hill to climb, but I don't think it's completely impossible for the Musketeers.
And Matt, you look at what Xavier's done this season and some of the adversity that they have gone through, and those back-to-back losses against Villanova and UConn, it really seemed as if it provided a spark for Sean Miller's staff for the Xavier Musketeers because they took all their anger out on Providence, winning that one 85-65. Then they come back and take down Butler 85-71, using all their anger on the Butler Bulldogs as well. So the upcoming schedule, obviously, for Xavier, they play in the Big East. There's no such thing as an easy game when you're playing in the Big East. But Georgetown and Creighton, this is a Xavier team that has looked as best as it has all season long. And if they can continue to stack these wins going up against UConn in a couple of weeks, they have a chance to make that game their turning point of their season. Because again, Georgetown, Creighton, you win those games, that puts you at 11-8 on the season. You're 2 games over 500 in the Big East. And then if you beat UConn on the road, the number 1 team right now in the entire nation, if you win your next 3 games, nobody will be sleeping on the Xavier Musketeers, and they will be right back in the conversation of, I'm not going to say the top 25 by any means because they are still an 8-loss team, but they'll be put back on the map for all of NCAA college basketball. And the most important thing with the Xavier Musketeers is that this young core, this young team will have confidence. If you can start stacking these wins, they're on a 2-game winning streak. You win your next few games, you beat UConn, the number 1 team in the nation. That installs confidence back into Xavier, which they've ultimately been lacking all season long, and it's been very visible when they've been playing on the floor.
Yeah, I would say for Xavier being a top 25 team, like I said, it's a super tall hill to climb, and it's possible that it won't even end up happening at any point this season. But talking about an 8-loss team, Marquette, they're a 5-loss team, ranked 17th right now in the country. Granted, they've lost to some pretty tough competition, some powerhouse teams this year. But my point on Xavier potentially being a top 25 team is never say never. It's totally possible. I would say they would have to almost be perfect, like maybe lose the game to UConn by 2 points or something, and that might be the only leeway they have to lose a game and still be a top 25 team. But they lose to St. John, they lose to Marquette, any of those 2 games, they lose to Creighton, they lose to, especially if they lose to DePaul at any point during this year, and there are 2 games that they still have to play. They lose to Seton Hall. I don't think there's any chance Xavier gets into the top 25. It almost has to be a perfect run for the Musketeers if they want to creep into the top 25 in college basketball.
And obviously, Xavier, they're led by Quincy Lavare. He has 17.6 points per game. He shoots 43% from beyond the arc. But obviously, Xavier, there's a lot of other players on this team. Davion McKnight, who averages 10.1 points per game, and he averages 4.2 rebounds as well. Desmond Claude averaging 15.8 points per game. There's a lot of players that Xavier has who can contribute to going on this run. And Xavier, again, you want to look at their record and see that they're 9-8, but remember all the seniors that they lost. Remember all the talent that they lost over the offseason. Now a very, very young Xavier Musketeers in the Cintas Center that is ultimately rebuilding and which is trying to find their footing. and they went to Xavier for a reason. This has been one of the top basketball programs across all of NCAA. Obviously, they're not on the level of Gonzaga. Obviously, they're not on the level of what we've seen with Baylor over the last couple of years, or UConn for that matter. But you look at what they've done when they've hit the NCAA March Madness tournament over the last couple of years. Last year, they went all the way to the Elite Eight. The year before that, they won the NIT. So they were one of the first teams on the outside looking in. The Xavier Musketeers, this is a good basketball team. We've been saying it all season long. If they can have some of those younger players continue to step up like those players we already mentioned just did, this is a team that can go on a run. Time for a break. We'll be back. We're talking UC Bearcats coming up next. There's a lot to talk about with them. That's up next on Sports Now.
Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee. Every day, we find ourselves on a path full of decisions.
It's me.
Sometimes small and sometimes big. Sometimes alone and sometimes together. At McAfee, everything we do is done with your comfort, health, and convenience in mind. She always wanted the best for you, and now you can rest knowing you've provided the best for her. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Welcome back to Sports Now. We have about 25 minutes left in our show. We have a couple of other college basketball teams we want to talk about. Obviously, the UC Bearcats, the UD Flyers, both playing games last night. We're talking about them coming up. And it's also Hot Take Wednesday as well. So we'll make our hot takes at the very end of the show for the week. Matt, let's move on. Let's talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats. The Bearcats, it seems like they got that big win a couple weeks ago on the road. They come back home. They lose to Texas. Then they end up losing on Saturday to Baylor. And this is a team now that you talk about the Cincinnati Bearcats, and it was a bit of a struggle. If they were right on the edge of getting ranked, now you have back-to-back losses, which dropped them in the rankings, but both of their losses were to top 25 teams. And the Bearcats getting a big win last night, proving to everybody that the Bearcats are still legit and proving that the Big 12, frankly, is the best conference in all of college basketball as they took down TCU, who's also another team in the top 25.
And yeah, we talk about, and you just mentioned the Big 12 probably being the best conference in college basketball right now. These 6 games in a row tell you all you need to know about the Big 12. And these are obviously, some of these rankings are rankings as UC played them, but still nonetheless, they're ranked teams. BYU at number 12. UC takes them down 71-60. Texas at 25. They lost to them 74-73. Baylor at 14. I think they've jumped up to 9 now. Lost that game 62-59. 19 TCU. They just beat them in OT last night by 4, 81-77. Their next 2 games against number 15 Oklahoma this weekend, and then at number 3 Kansas. That is 6 straight games against top 25 teams for the UC Bearcats. And the other thing that I want to talk about, and you talk about how the 2 losses for them kind of slides them out of the conversation for top 25, there's no reason for that to be the case. They're playing 6 straight top 25 teams, and the combined totals for the if you add the number of points they lost to in those 2 games, it adds to 4 against a current top 10 team in Texas who just fell out of the top 25. But when it comes down to should UC still be in the conversation for top 25, heck yeah, they should. There's no reason they shouldn't be in the conversation for top 25. You take a look at the last 4 games they've played with the upcoming 2 games they have, and right now, their win over TCU last night covers the -4 they have for the 2 losses against Texas and Baylor, so they're essentially plus 11 points in those 4 games. I don't think you should really be throwing Cincinnati to the side since they lost those 2 games, because they're playing very, very, very tough competition, and I wouldn't be surprised if they potentially take down Oklahoma. It's a home game for the Bearcats, and then they've got a road game against Kansas. I do not see them winning that one, but that's because it's Kansas. Then they've got UCF, West Virginia, road game against Texas Tech, who's currently 25, home game against Houston, who's number 5, home game against Iowa State, who's number 24, at UCF, then at home versus Oklahoma State. Then you've got 2 road games against TCU, who obviously right now is 19, but they could drop because UC just beat them. Then a road game against number 5 Houston. Then you got Kansas State on the road against number 15 Oklahoma, at home against West Virginia. It's safe to say, we talk about this 6-game stretch for UC being super difficult and how it's probably the toughest stretch they're going to play all season long. Safe to say, I think the entire conference play for UC is going to be the toughest part of their entire season, because you just take a look at the number of ranked teams that they have not just left to go, but have played inside of the Big 12. You take a look, there's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 games in conference where the team is ranked inside of the top 25. That tells you all you need to know about how tough this schedule is for UC, because now I'm going to add up the conference games that aren't featuring teams inside of the top 25. UCF, West Virginia, UCF, Oklahoma State, Kansas State, West Virginia. That's 12 games against ranked opponents when it comes to in-conference games, 6 games against non-ranked opponents. That's all you need to know, and that tells you everything you need to know about the Big 12 and how tough it is to play. In UC, talking about a big win against TCU last night. They've got a big and tough test in Oklahoma, though, coming up this weekend.
Matt, we talk about the Bearcats, and we've talked about them plenty of times. And with them moving from the American Athletic Conference to the Big 12 this season, now you're going to start seeing the Bearcats start to get a little bit more traction and maybe some bit more favoritism when it comes to the top 25 rankings. And not only that, but also for the NCAA March Madness tournament. And the reason why I say this is because you talk about their in-conference schedule they're playing, and it's loaded. And the Big 12, without a doubt, is the #1 conference in all of college basketball this season. And I don't think that there's any question about that. The Bearcats, they have gone through their first couple of games in conference, but Matt, it does not at all correlate and it does not foreshadow the future of the Bearcats schedule in the Big 12. The Bearcats, they've gone through a little snippet of the Big 12 schedule, but it doesn't even foreshadow what is upcoming for the Cincinnati Bearcats. Again, you have Oklahoma, then Kansas. You still have Houston a couple of more times. You have Oklahoma 2 more times. You have TCU once again. You have Iowa State, a team who beat Houston last week as well. The Bearcats, what we talked about with them was it is so important to win your out-of-conference games. because the overall record means quite a bit. And the out-of-conference schedule that the Bearcats played in so far this season has not been the strongest. So losses in those out-of-conference games would put them way behind where they'd have to win more games. Matt, they have 14 in-conference games left. If the Bearcats split and go 500, 14 games that they go 7-7, that puts them at 20 and 21 and 10, if I'm not mistaken, or 20 and 11. I beg your pardon, I messed up the record. That puts them at 20 and 11 to end the regular season. Not even including what they can do in the Big 12 tournament, but with how many ranked teams and ranked opponents that they take down, if they finish 500 in conference, a 20 and 11 record to me, with the schedule that the Bearcats have played, without a doubt, to me, should get them into the March Madness tournament. They need to go 500 in conference play, but at the end of the day, if they go above and beyond that, this is going to be a team without a doubt we see in March Madness. So Cincinnati, they have set themselves up for success. They control their own destiny. And not only that, they're playing some really, really good basketball. What the Bearcats need to be focused on right now is they have got to beat opponents who they should beat. Obviously, they have Oklahoma and then Kansas. Oklahoma, winnable game. Kansas, you say not so much. I think that Cincinnati has a chance, but obviously it's Kansas. Those next couple of games after this stretch between UCF and West Virginia, you have got to make sure that you win those. The Bearcats, if they can keep it close against their ranked opponents, and if they can win games how they're supposed to win, the Bearcats they are a team that can end up in the top 25.
And yeah, taking a look at this Bearcats team, you said they go 500 throughout the remainder of the season, and especially
worst case scenario.
It's only conference play left to go for the UC Bearcats.
And I say that as worst case scenario. I'm not saying that they're going to go 7-7 through their last 14 games of the season. I'm not saying that that should be what they're aiming for. They should be aiming at 14-0. But I mean that in a sense, a practical sense, that let's just say hypothetically they were to finish 500 in the season with the schedule they've played, they would be in the March Madness tournament.
And yeah, I wasn't bringing that up trying to dog you or anything
I know. I just had to clarify some.
I'm just saying, if they end up going 7-7, get a win against Oklahoma, get a win against Houston, maybe if it's only a win against Oklahoma, with what UC has done this year, I think they take down maybe TCU again, and TCU is still ranked by the time they play them. They take down Texas Tech. They take down Iowa State. If they beat ranked opponents inside of the Big 12, I think even if we end up seeing them go 20-11, like I said, if they take down Houston, if they end up upsetting Kansas in that game that they've got coming up, they take down Oklahoma in that stretch of 7-7, I think they're almost an automatic bid for March Madness. You just take a look at the schedule that they've got, the fact that in conference, the ratio of ranked opponents to non-ranked opponents in the schedule, or teams that have been in the top 25 to teams that have not been in the top 25, is 2-1. So you're playing twice as many ranked opponents in your conference schedule as opposed to non-ranked opponents. And that's to say, that's if we stop right now saying Oklahoma State doesn't make it in the top 25. UCF doesn't make it in the top 25. Kansas State or West Virginia don't make it in the top 25 by the time UC plays them. I think it's safe to say if UC takes down Oklahoma, they can take down Houston in one of the two games, maybe take down Oklahoma twice, maybe take down Texas Tech, Iowa State. I think that should almost give them an automatic bid into March Madness.
It is time for a break. We're talking UD Flyers coming up next on Sports Now.
We understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down.
It's okay.
Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Help with anything, Gigi?
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down.
Go. It's okay.
Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Help with anything, Gigi?
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down.
Go. It's okay.
Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Help with anything, Gigi?
At McAfee, we understand that life doesn't stop when something in your home breaks down.
Go. It's okay.
Our customers count on us to be there, ready when they need us.
Is there anything else you need from me?
No, sir, I have all the information I need.
Great, thanks. Just lock the door on the way out.
Thank you.
Let us get your home up and running again. Breathe easy. Choose McAfee.
Jackson Lightcap alongside Matthew Pennington here on Sports Now as we welcome you back. Final 11 minutes of the show. Thank you for joining us. And we have a few more topics we want to talk about, and they revolve around the UD Flyers. The University of Dayton and the Flyers, big winners yesterday over St. Louis. A big win at home, 70-65. 11 straight wins for the Flyers. And not just that, they are also now number 21 in the nation.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a, I wouldn't say sketchy win yesterday, but there were moments where it felt like, oh boy, could this be the first conference loss for UD on the season? Excuse me.
The sickness is kicking in.
Oh, I'm struggling right now. You don't even know. But we talked about with Wright State the 18-point run that we saw Youngstown State go on granted, it was in the second half, so it made it a little bit more difficult for Wright State to try to claw their way back from. But St. Louis went on a 14-0 run early in this game. I think it was around the 11-minute or so mark in the first half. Went on a 14-0 run, made it I think 30-23 game. No, it was a little bit lower score. It was 23-16 game. I might have you take over. I'm struggling over here, but
I'm going to scoot backwards.
Yeah, get away from me, dude.
Because I don't want anything of what you have.
I'm struggling, bro.
I don't want anything of what you have. So
I don't know what's going on. It was legit after the show yesterday. Like midway through the show, I was like, I'm starting to feel a little like off. And now, like after the show last night, I was like, I feel really off right now. But yeah, no, talk about
keep trucking through. We have 10 minutes.
I'm gonna try my best. The problem is my throat keeps getting really dry, so it's like super terrible to try to just
You're a trooper.
Even talk. So if my eyes continue to water, that's exactly why, because I have a really dry throat and I'm trying to talk as much as I possibly can. But talking about this I say Wright State because I was just talking about the Youngstown State game, but UD being in the top 25, we talked about the Flyers pretty much getting everybody's best. It's safe to say they got that against St. Louis last night, but they prevailed. Talked about that 14-0 run, how the UD Flyers were able to prevail from that. 5-point win was pretty big for the Flyers last night.
And Matt, now to give you maybe a little bit of a break, as it seems as if you're going through it over on the other side of the table.
I'm dying, man.
Matt, to give you a little bit of a break, because of the best friend that I am to you, I'm going to go on a rant, and I'm going to try to take up as much time as I can.
Let me recover. I need it.
Well, Matt, anyway, so you're off camera now, so you can do what you need to do. But
I just need water.
Anyway, we only have 8 more minutes left in the show, but I'll go out and say this. When you look at what the Flyers have been able to do so far this season, they're 14-2 on the season. They are on an 11-game winning streak. They've gone up against some of the top teams in all of college basketball. And Matt, I'll go out and say this. I don't know necessarily if this is a hot take, but this is also coming off of a season where they lost a couple of their star players, including Mustafa Mzil and Toumani Camara. When you lose players such as Mustafa Mzil and Toumani Camara, obviously Camara playing in the NBA, Mzil, who was a starter for the Flyers and really propelled the Flyers as well. When you lose players like that, there's a lot of question on whether or not you're going to be able to recover from that the next season. What does the UD Flyers go out and do? They go out, they end up signing Nate Santos, or they end up going and pursuing Nate Santos in the transfer portal. He comes to Dayton, and now you have your team based around a lot of juniors on this team. Obviously, Santos, Elvis, you have Enoch Cheeks, you have Javon Bennett, and you also have Duron Holmes, who's been your star player this season. But you also look at the big what if, and I'm sure that there's a big what if situation and a big what if for the Flyers. That what if Toumani Camara did stay for another season? What if Mustafa Mzil stayed for another season? If you add those two players right now into the Flyers rotation, I'm not saying that they're better than that team of 2020, because I don't think that there's any Flyers team that'll possibly be able to top that team of 2020, but I definitely think it would be comparable. And it also gives Anthony Grant, head coach Anthony Grant for the Flyers, a lot more slack as well. Because when you look at Anthony Grant, entering this season, he received a lot of backlash. And there were a lot of people that were coming out and saying that without him without that team of 2020, without that Flyers team in 2020, the COVID year team, would Anthony Grant still be employed by the University of Dayton? And my answer to that was yes, he should. But at the end of the day, he was entering this season on the hot seat. But the amount of what he's been able to do with this team and what he's been able to do together as a coach and rally this team together after losing two of their best players from a season ago with Mustafa Mzil and also Toumani Camara departing, and what he's been able to do, bringing in the recruits, growing them through now 4 to 5 years And this has ultimately been in the building for the Flyers. And when you're a small college like the Flyers, you're not going to be able to go out and pursue some of the top recruits in the entire nation. Therefore, you're going to have to go out and get recruits that you can develop and build a team around over the next couple of years. And that's why we've started to see four-year sprouts for the Flyers. Obviously, it goes back way back into the Archie Miller days when you had that team of 2015 with Scoochie Smith leading the way. That went all the way to the Elite Eight. I think the Elite Eight year was 2013, but Scoochie Smith continued to play through 2015. Then you look at the 4-year period. Now, obviously, the 2020 year, that's a 5-year period, but that's when you had a lot of seniors on your team. Another 4-year period, and now that's when we're starting to see the Flyers start to hit their stride. It's a recruiting process, and that's a recruiting process that I think Anthony Grant does a tremendous job at developing these players. He does an incredible job developing these players. He does a tremendous job coaching these players, and he does a tremendous job bringing these players where they need to be. And that's one thing that Anthony Grant, that's one thing that's very overlooked about Anthony Grant for the UD Flyers. And with what he's done, yes, he may have entered this season on the hot seat for the Flyers, but it was only a matter of time before this group of players that he has had for the last couple of years takes off. Now they're 14-2. They're number 21 in the nation. I don't think there's any question now about Anthony Grant being a tremendous coach, and not to mention a big what if. What if they were able to keep Mustafa Msil and Tumani Kamara on the Flyers for this team? This team would be very comparable to the team of 2020, and I think that that speaks highly on the organization, and I also think that that speaks highly on head coach Anthony Grant as well. Matt, real quick before we get in our hot take segment as well, UD, the Flyers, a big game coming up on Saturday. It just looks like you're okay to talk a little bit, hopefully, but big game coming up on Saturday against Rhode Island, and the Flyers will welcome back a familiar face, Archie Miller. Remember, he is the head coach now of Rhode Island. Rhode Island and Archie Miller and they make their return to UD Arena to face the Flyers. And that leads me with this question. Just about a minute left. So, Matt, before we go into our hot takes, so not too much time here, but Matt, who would you rather have, Anthony Grant or Archie Miller? Two tremendous coaches for the Flyers, but with what Anthony Grant's been able to do with the certain teams that he's had, to me, I think he's the man for UD.
Yeah, between Miller and Grant, I would probably say I'd probably go with Grant because obviously you had UD make it to the Elite Eight with Miller, but you also take into account the fact that UD didn't have a chance to show what being a number 1 seed could do for the UD Flyers in March Madness. So talking about who I'd rather have, it's close between the two coaches, but I think I'd go Anthony Grant because especially now, his team's at 21 right now, and then the year they were the number 1 seed in March Madness, or one of the 1 seeds of the 4 teams, I think I'd go Grant, but Miller would be pretty close when it came down to who I'd have to pick.
And Matt, now let's move on. We have 1 more minute left in the show, so keep trucking through. I tried taking a lot of the rant time for you to recover, and I'm glad that I was able to give you at least a little bit of juice. But Matt, so now let's move into a Hot Take Wednesday. My hot take, the University of Xavier goes on a run. They win their next 2 games, and they beat UConn to get the ultimate confidence that they need. And the Xavier Musketeers are going to be playing really good basketball throughout the rest of the season.
My hot take, mine's going to go on UC basketball. I think the Bearcats, after that overtime win against TCU, they use that as fuel to take down Oklahoma and then take down Kansas on the road and jump themselves into the top 25.
And that certainly would do it, and that'll also take us to the end of this 2-hour show. I'm sure that Matt is probably the happiest person hearing that.
Hallelujah.
Nonetheless, that'll take us to the end of our 2-hour show. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in for the previous couple of hours. Matt, I told you at the beginning of the show, we're going to start using both soundtracks a little bit more. So we're going to end the show on this. Once again, thanks for dealing with us. We're live tomorrow from 4 to 6. Make sure to join us as we talk about the NFL playoffs. That's upcoming on TKDS. We'll talk to you tomorrow.